It's time for Tonia's Kitchen, taking you around the world of food and wine. Here is Tonia King.
My guest today is Amy Traverso, senior food editor with Yankee Magazine. And today we're talking about moving into a new season, lots of different foods to think about.
I mean, I think anyone who lives in New England has that joy when we see the signs of spring. And we are definitely feeling it and sort of highlighting it in the new issue of Yankee, the March-April issue. And also we have in the first weekend of April, the premiere of our 8th season of our public television show, Weekends with Yankee. So this is just a really fun time of year for many reasons.
Let's talk about some of the cool features in the current issue. What are you cooking up?
Well, so in every issue of the magazine, I do a column called In Season where, I usually highlight an ingredient that's coming into season at the time that the magazine comes out. But this time, March is always a little tricky because we have maple, but, there's not a lot of there's not really much growing except maybe in greenhouses. There are some root vegetables that, may have been overwintered. It's kind of a little bit of a tough one for fresh ingredients. So I decided this month to focus on Irish food to sort of to celebrate St. Patrick's Day with a couple of dishes. And I'm so happy with how they turned out. The first one is a shepherd's pie, but instead of doing a regular mashed potato topping on a sort of beef or lamb, you can kind of choose whichever you want base. I did a colcannon topping. So colcannon is, it's just mashed potatoes with some greens and some herbs. So in this case, there's like Napa cabbage and scallions. It's really easy to make. I mean, you just make your standard mashed potatoes and you chop up some of those greens and you fold them in. It just gives such a nice flavor. It changes. It just, I like that it adds flavor, especially, from the scallions. But also it just adds nutrition. It's adding like fiber and vitamins, and we all need to be eating our greens. And if you're not a big greens fan, this is a good way to kind of sneak them in. And then, then you have your base, which is just, ground either beef or lamb, the aromatics like carrots, celery, garlic, dried thyme, black pepper, tomato paste, Worcestershire sauce. So it's really simple. And I like that. I feel like adding the vegetables really does make this a one-pan meal one skillet meal because you're getting everything in there, not just your potatoes and your meat. So I'm really happy. I'm making it this month just at home because it's just good for the days that are still, the evenings that are still kind of chilly. And then a recipe that I love but was such a bear to perfect, which is chocolate stout brownies. So I don't know if you've ever had like chocolate Guinness cake. It is, I think, probably something you see more in like England and Great Britain, but it's a chocolate cake that has Guinness added to the batter. And the Guinness, oddly, in the presence of chocolate, the flavor kind of goes to almost like a gingerbread flavor. It's really nice. So anyway, I thought, the cake's fine, but what about something even faster and easier like brownies? But it took like 8 tries to get this recipe to work. It was so frustrating because the nature of a brownie is you don't add liquid to it because, that makes it more of a cake.
Right.
So to get the brownie texture while also adding the Guinness was the challenge. But I did get it. I figured it out, and they're delicious. And it's a really simple recipe. You make the batter like on the stovetop. You just kind of stir everything together. You've got your butter, your Guinness, and your cocoa powder, your sugar, your eggs, and you basically want to melt the butter, add the Guinness and the cocoa powder, and kind of whisk that together to get the cocoa to really like bloom and give all its flavor. And then you take it off the heat. You add sugar, and then you stir in eggs and some flour, baking soda, salt. That's it. Like, it's a really simple recipe. It comes out really moist. And again, you have that, like, there's something about Guinness that plays so well with chocolate. So you get more layers of flavor, but the texture of the brownie. So very happy with that one.
So, you said you had to make it like 8 times. So I'm sure whoever were the recipients of the others probably really enjoyed it.
Yeah, like nobody hated them at any point in the process, but they definitely, they definitely were happier the closer I got to the brownie texture because that's what they were expecting. You want the crispy edges and that kind of, yeah, fudgy quality. And then for our feature food story, we did a roundup of some of the amazing places we are visiting in this season of Weekends with Yankee, which is, I can't believe we've done 8 seasons already. So there's this incredible lobster pasta dish that I learned when we visited the restaurant Aragosta in Maine, way up in Deer Isle, Maine, on the Blue Hill Peninsula. We have a recipe for honestly one of the most delicious things I've eaten in a long time, which is a very easy Thai pumpkin red curry.
Oh my
And
goodness.
it's so good. I mean, it has so many layers of flavor. And I learned it from this woman, Mshika Alberini, who is originally from Thailand, came to the US to go to business school, and then pivoted to becoming a restaurateur after her sister passed away. Her sister was wanted to be a chef and open a restaurant. And so in honor of her, Mshika kind of pivoted and opened this really good restaurant up in Littleton, New Hampshire in the White Mountains. And it's called Chang Thai Cafe. And she and her mom shared their recipe for red Thai curry. And, a couple of the ingredients may not be available in a typical supermarket. There's red curry paste, coconut milk, fish sauce, and kaffir lime leaves. Those are the ones that are harder to find. But if you have an Asian market anywhere near you, you can definitely find these ingredients and you can mail order them. And I swear this is so good and so easy to make that it's really worth it. It's really worth sourcing those few ingredients.
Now that sounds great. What are you doing with the curry?
Yeah, so it's like a one pot meal other than you make the rice in another pot. You warm some oil in a, Dutch oven, you add the red curry paste and you stir just to kind of let those flavors again bloom. And then you add in coconut milk. Obviously it tastes better when you use the full fat coconut milk, but you can use the light coconut milk. And then you're adding some cubed squash. I really like kabocha squash, which is kind of it's a little like butternut squash. You can also use butternut squash, or you could use like a sugar pumpkin. Anything that is sweet and has like a little bit of a firm texture, so it'll hold up to cooking. So you cube that up, then you add some chicken. You don't have to add chicken. You could leave the chicken out if you're vegetarian. You could add salmon. If you're pescatarian, you could add tofu. Or just have it be a vegan dish with just the a tofu or the pumpkin alone. And then you're adding the kaffir lime leaves, which you kind of steep like bay leaves to give off their flavor, fish sauce, brown sugar, and salt. And that's it. And you just let it cook until the squash is tender, which is only about 20 to 30 minutes. So this is truly like once you have those ingredients in your pantry, this is a weeknight 30-minute meal. And the flavor is so rich and wonderful. So can't recommend that enough. We also have a great clam chowder recipe, which I mean, who doesn't want to have a clam chowder recipe in Yankee Magazine? And the thing that was interesting about this recipe is that it incorporates herbs, which I think for some people may feel like sacrilege to put like oregano and dill in a chowder, but I actually was convinced by this recipe. I got it from chef Dan Cote at the Pelham House, which is on Cape Cod in Dennisport. And, it's a pretty standard chowder, but putting in a little bit of chopped oregano and dill really enhances the flavor in a lovely way. And so that's a really nice one. And
are you using fresh oregano?
Yeah, you could use dried. Generally the rule is if you're using a dried herb, you use half as much as you would with the fresh.
Right.
So yeah, if you have some sitting in your pantry and you don't want to buy fresh herbs, which can get pricey, you can definitely use the dried. In fact, I have used dried. So yeah, it's just a nice chowder, and that little hit of green feels springy and just like a nice variation on a good chowder.
Oh yeah.
And then for a decadent dessert, we have a cider donut bread pudding, which was a recipe we got from Cider Hill Farm in Amesbury, Massachusetts. We spent a beautiful day in the apple orchard in the fall and I got to make cider donuts in the bakery. And then when they have, day-old donuts, which how many of us actually end up with day-old donuts? I think mostly get eaten on the same day. But if you do happen to have some, or you buy some at the supermarket that aren't quite like super fresh, you can make the most just delicious bread pudding. Very simple, just basically mixing up a custard, pouring it over the donuts in a baking dish and, letting that sit for a little bit and then baking it off and you're all set.
Yeah, that sounds great. And plus, you in an apple orchard in the fall sounds like a perfect combination.
Yeah, it was a really, really fun day. I mean, I always feel like I'm in heaven when I'm in an apple orchard. So it was great. And it's a really nice segment. Yeah.
Now, you started this conversation a little bit earlier talking about a lobster pasta, which intrigued me.
Yes.
And so
Yes.
we didn't get into details about that recipe. Tell me about that.
Right. Yeah. So Aragosta is, a remarkable restaurant. It's been nominated for a bunch of James Beard Awards. It's like excellent. It's a destination restaurant. It can be a little hard to get a reservation, so you want to book way in advance. But it's perched on a cove in Deer Isle with a beautiful view of just water and islands and the rocky coast with the spruce trees. And this recipe is a bit of a signature, although the restaurant does it in a slightly fancier way. They have it's a homemade filled pasta. The chef Devin Finnegan adapted it for home cooks, and it's really very doable. I mean, you use store-bought pasta. She recommends you can use like a tubular pasta, like a ziti. You can also use a fettuccine. It's really actually quite adaptable. And you're taking basically a pound of lobster cut into, bite-sized pieces. Obviously, it's more affordable to do this if you buy the lobster yourself and cook it and, take the meat out.
Right.
You can obviously buy the meat pre-shelled, so that's your choice. And you're making a very simple sauce with mascarpone cheese, lemon juice, lemon zest, some garlic, and some parsley.
Wow.
And then you sort of stir that together and you mix the lobster with that in a bowl and you set it aside for a minute. And then you're cooking your pasta in a large pot of water. And then you take a skillet and you're simmering some wine. So you're kind of making a really easy beurre blanc here. You simmer some wine, you add some shallot, and then you cut up some butter into small pieces and just whisk that in and give it a little like dose of heavy cream, like 2 tablespoons, not much. So you have this like really, and then you add that lobster mixture with the mascarpone, the lobster, the lemon. So you end up with kind of this creamy sauce that's balanced by the acidity, and you toss that with the pasta. And you can, if you feel inspired, you can make a little gremolata topping, which is just minced garlic, some fresh parsley chopped up, and some freshly grated lemon zest. But you don't have to do it. I mean, this dish is so delicious even without that. So, it's a bit of a special occasion situation because lobster is pricey. But gosh, if you had like guests coming and you wanted to do something really special and very New England, I mean, it's beautiful to look at with all the colors, and it's really, really delicious.
That really does sound unbelievable.
Yeah, I mean,
Wow.
it's very much
Oh
a
my
recipe that
goodness.
she cannot take off the menu. Like that,
Oh,
everyone who comes has to have their lobster pasta. So yeah, and I appreciate that she adapted it for home kitchens.
absolutely. So is that included in the recent issue?
Yeah, that recipe, it's like the opening recipe in this story about the new season of the show.
We're talking with Amy Traverso, the senior food editor with Yankee Magazine. Now, tell me about the latest TV show. What do we have?
Yeah,
What do we have cooking?
oh, we have so many amazing. This season was so good. I'm so excited about it. I was actually just watching a sort of almost finished version of one episode. So we really went all over the 6 states of New England. I spent the majority of my time in Maine and New Hampshire and Massachusetts. So as I said, we went to Aragosta up in Deer Island, Maine. We went to Primo Restaurant in Rockland, Maine,
Oh, yes,
which
I've been there. Wow.
was so good. One of my favorite days, we went out. We met these 2 sisters who are the daughters of a lobsterman, and they grew up very much like, you know, on lobster boats in the woods of Maine, like very much like native Mainers. And they had kind of gone off to pursue their own careers, and their dad sadly died very unexpectedly, and they decided to come back to Georgetown where they'd grown up, and they started an oyster farm, and it's
Wow.
called Oyster. So it's OYST capital HERS because it's 2 sisters who run it.
Yeah.
I swear they were the most delicious oysters I've ever had. They are excellent oysters. And then they opened sort of a wine and seafood bar in the town of Bath, Maine. And so it's just, you can go there and have like a glass of bubbly and some really incredible oysters, not just theirs, but ones from all over Maine. And it was so cool to hear their story and see how they were kind of honoring their dad's life by,
Yeah.
being farmers themselves. And then after that, we all went over to this incredible treehouse resort called Seguin.
Wow.
There are three tree houses that were built to maximize beautiful views of an estuary. They are luxurious. You are up in the trees. They even have hot tubs that are built up on
Oh, wow.
platforms in the trees. I mean, it was so beautiful. So we went there and I made a really nice oyster, kind of a variation on oysters Rockefeller. And it was a great day. We visited, as I mentioned, Cider Hill Farm in Amesbury, Massachusetts. We went out on a lobster boat in Camden, Maine. Just so many great adventures. It was such a treat. And we also explored the real burgeoning food scene of Cape Cod.
Oh,
One thing we, said in this segment was that it seems like I grew up going to Cape Cod every summer for a week or two with my family. And, Cape Cod was summer you went despite the food. You'd sort of go there and, you'd go to your clam shack or whatever, but you weren't going there to like have amazing dining
right,
experiences. It was
right.
about the beaches and this now and maybe the ice cream, but now Cape Cod has some really great restaurants and bakeries and things. So we visited some of those and I got to go. There's a place called the Lighthouse Keepers Pantry in Yarmouthport, Massachusetts. And it's a business that started during the pandemic. It was a woman, Kelly, who started making jams as like a hobby, and she ended up opening a cafe bakery. She sells her jams. She makes delicious scones and great coffee. And we went out and picked fresh beach plums in the dunes on the beach. And we went back to her house and got to make beach plum jam, which is so good and such a New England thing. So yeah, lots of good
Oh my
stuff.
good. Amy, how can you not enjoy your job? I
I
mean,
know, I know.
really?
It's so much fun. It's
Oh,
the weeks where we shoot the show are definitely the best weeks of the year for
oh,
sure.
absolutely. And what's so cool about the whole TV feature is that people from other parts of the country can really get a take on what New England is. You're really doing such a service to people that love to travel and hopefully travel to New England.
Yeah, when we first started the show 8 years ago, we thought, well, we know that because it's public television, you sort of make the show and you pitch it to all the independent public
Right,
television stations around the country, and you hope that they'll pick it up. We
right.
thought, definitely it'll get picked up in New England and probably like maybe on the East Coast. It turns out that like every state except Hawaii, which is very understandable, airs the show. It's in all the major markets, and you can also watch it on Amazon Prime. So the national level of interest in New England was a wonderful wasn't a total surprise because we know that half of our readers of Yankee Magazine live outside of New England, but it was wonderful to know that there was this much interest in New England.
I'm thrilled for you because it's such an exciting job. And, you learn so much, you meet so many people, and you find so many cool places that maybe you didn't even know existed.
And and we really make sure that they're all places or experiences that anyone could have, that they're places that are accessible to folks. We try to aim for like, that the different price points and different types of experiences depending on interests. And, my co-host Richard Weiss is like an explorer, an adventurer. So he's doing all kinds of amazing adventures all over, going sort of there's this incredible water park he went to in New Hampshire where they're using a river to create a place where you can surf on this river. You
Oh,
can, I
wow.
mean, just amazing. Like, he's out on Squam Lake Winnipesaukee in New Hampshire. He's, exploring these incredible bike trails that snake through Vermont. He's out there having all kinds of fun adventures. So I love watching him just sort of really live that New England outdoorsy life that I know a lot of people love. I'm more the foodie, but he's having all kinds of adventures.
Well, I mean, you just combine it all and it's just exciting. Now, what is the website for folks to discover more?
Well, so you can go to weekendswithyankee.com or you can go to our main website, which is newengland.com. And that you can also find a link to the show there. And you can look up, where the show is, where and when the show is airing near you. And so there's, because every public television station is on its own schedule. So Sometimes you have to like figure out, okay, when is my station airing this?
Right.
But if you live in Massachusetts or Vermont, New Hampshire, it tends to air on all those stations in early April. And then it's a 13 episode season. So it's several months of new episodes.
That's great.
Yeah.
That's really exciting. Thank you so much for all your information and wonderful recipes and just exciting travels in New England.
Thanks. It's always so fun to talk to you.
Thanks for tuning in. We hope you'll subscribe to this podcast as we continue to take you around the world of food and wine on Tonia's Kitchen.